Okay, so we're back for part 3 of the series on the Christian Manifesto, which I feel is a better name than the Beatitudes, which is truly meaningless. And what we're going to discuss today is the preamble. Let's just have a quick look at the makeup of that of the structure of the sermon Jesus gave. We dealt with the core principles of Christianity, and we're now going to look at section 2, which is the preamble, bearing in mind that Jesus had a completely beautiful structure to the speech that he gave. Before we delve into that, I just want to point out something to you which is quite important. Again, highlighting this importance that we understand that the New Testament rests on top of the Old. That first verse, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I just want to show you a little bit about the fact that Jesus was Jewish and thought in a Jewish way and spoke to Jewish people. He's the savior of the Gentiles, but he grew up as a Jew, and when he used words like kingdom, he did so with a Jewish understanding of that word. So how do we, what actually led me to this understanding of the manifesto is that one word opened up this whole, everything I'm going to teach you. And it was through understanding the Jewish meaning of that word. Now, let me just show you how that works. So we have the New Testament, in which we have the English word kingdom. If you have a Greek interlinear Bible, you can see that the Greek word underlining from which we translated kingdom is basileia. Now, basileia, really, the understanding of the Greek meaning of basileia is not there. We don't have sufficient understanding of ancient Koine Greek on that particular word to fully express what Jesus meant when he said it. So what we do is we go then to a document called the LXX, which is a Greek version of the Old Testament, which was written, debatably, 200 to 300 years before Christ. It was definitely within the 200 to 300 years before Christ, so a couple of hundred years before Jesus. So what we can see there is, if we can find the word kingdom in the Hebrew, and we can then see the matching word that was used in Greek, which was basileia. So that tells us we can look at the Hebrew word. If we follow that causal chain there, we can see then that the Hebrew word for kingdom, if you look at it there on the screen, you can see the first 3 letters. Now Hebrew reads from right to left. So those first 3 letters in Hebrew, that first one looks like a kettle. That one is the mem. That one that looks like a squiggle is lamed. And the one that looks like a C facing backwards is kaf. And those 3 letters together mean king. Now each of those letters has a ancient meaning. So these were actually hieroglyphic symbols before. They were pictures. And each picture had a meaning. So that's how people wrote. So the Jews actually preserved, although this is the modern version of it, they preserved behind these is the pictures. So for the 22 pictures, there are now 22 letters that look like this. So if you understand that, you can understand that behind each of those there's a picture. So that's a picture of the king. A king, the meaning of the word king for them was wrapped up in those 3 pictures. Now, my understanding of the ancient hieroglyphics is that first symbol means water, the second one means from, and the third one means hand. So water from the hand, or leadership from the hand, the king. Your life depended on the hand of the king, what the king wanted to do. That 4th symbol, very interestingly, this is where it gets really cool. That 4th symbol means writing. So the king's writing. So that your life depends on the writing of the king. That's what kingdom means. And when you get that, then you get what Jesus was telling you. He was saying, I'm the king, and these are my writings by which you must live. Just so simple and so beautiful. And again, you can see why it's so important that the Hebrew rests on top of, the New Testament rests on top of the Hebrew Old Testament. I wanted to just explain that to you so that you can see that there is a path of understanding and logic which you can follow to derive anything you need to see from the Bible. So, that's just a nice way for you to understand how important the underlying Old Testament, or what I prefer to call the First Testament, and its Hebrew content, and how well it's been preserved for you, so that you might not lose your way as we have with this word kingdom. These are the writings of our King to us. So, without further ado, let's dive into, and that's important. You'll see in a moment why, when we look at the preamble. So, in the preamble it says, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its flavor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth, nice word, good for nothing, but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a lamp and put it under the bushel, but on the stand, and it shineth unto all that are in the house. Now this, again, you see the old sounding, it sounds old, and I feel like the translators haven't done us a lot of favors in the way they do this. Retaining this old style, you can read different versions of the Bible, and I've used the American Standard Version, which is considered the most accurate version. So, but still, it sounds so old. And, ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its flavor, wherewith? We don't even use that word anymore. So what it's saying is, salt in ancient times was used to preserve. So you are the preservative of whatever you're going to hear now. This is how you will preserve the world. This is the salt. This is what you have in you. It's actually very interesting that the human body uses water to keep salt uses salt to keep water in stasis. So when you sweat, the reason salt comes out is that you're losing water and you have to get rid of the salt. So they both leave your body at the same time. So life, your ability to be a human and to have water in you is predominant. Salt is a part of the function of your being. And it's just so interesting that without salt, you actually can't live. You can't even keep water in your body. Salt is what keeps water on the right side of the membranes in your body, so that you don't end up with water running through the membranes of your body and basically killing you. So, salt is fundamental to life. And one, you have salt in you, and you are then the salt to the earth and to the people of the earth. And you need to be that. If you don't have any salt in you, you're good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men. The next verse is important. It says, you're the light of the world. So literally, the church is supposed to be beacons of light and hope to the rest of the world. So when you've gone into a holy huddle and you've encapsulated in your church and no one can see you, you're not doing what Jesus said. Your light needs to shine out into the world. And any church that fails to live that out is failing in the great cause of Jesus Christ, coming to the world to call men to himself. You're not helping. You are the light of the world, and a city set on a hill cannot be hid. Verse 15 says, neither do men light a lamp and put it under the bushel, but on the stand, and it shineth unto all those that are in the house. So this speaks of when you're in the church. There's an element of being a light in the church. So there's this The church is a light to the world, but inside the church, you're a light to the people within the church. It's not terribly complicated if you break it down properly and you read through some of the religious sort of, I don't know what to call it, poor translation. So you need to shine in the house as well. Even so, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works. So what is shining? Shining is good works. We shine when we go and do things in the world. We shine when we do good things in the church. That's our shine. Jesus leaves us without any confusion here. But the poor translation takes that away from what he was saying. And then, by all of this, you glorify your Father who is in heaven. So, why is this in the preamble? He's about to get into the meat of it. He's given you the 9 fundamental principles of Christianity. Now he gives a preamble. He's saying, I want you to think about this before I go into this. Because this piece here tells you, I expect you to shine by good works. I expect you to shine to the world, and I expect you to shine in the church, and I expect you to be salt to the world. Now, how is that going to occur? I'll explain to you in a moment. That's what Jesus is saying here. He's just prepping you what his end goal is before he starts telling you the nitty-gritty. He's saying, this is the end goal. I've got to tell you the end goal of what I'm asking you to do. Otherwise, you're not going to understand where we're going. This is your end goal. For each Christian, this is the end goal. I think that's quite simple and quite beautiful. It's really quite remarkable. And then he dives into part 2. Now, part 2 is where it gets very, very interesting. He says, think not that I came to destroy the law of the prophets. Okay, remember, Jesus is the new high priest and he's the king. Simultaneous, 2 roles. He's standing there and he's saying, I'm your new king. This is my kingdom and this is my kingdom's rules. But I'm also giving you the laws of my kingdom right now. But while I do that, I'm also telling you not to think I came to destroy the law and the prophets. Now, this is so important because what he's saying is, don't think Judaism disappears. It can't, because, and this, there is for those of you who don't know, there's always been this issue for 1,000 years that the church believes that they are the new Jew, and that God left the old Jew. It's called dispensationalism, that they were one dispensation and we are the new dispensation. And basically what we do is we leave the Jew out of the picture. And yet we can't, because he created the platform on which we stand. So how can we do that? And really, quite honestly, evil men have done this. It's evil to do this. We rest on the Jewish people. It's them that gave us the 2,000-year platform on which Jesus entered the world. So he says himself, don't think I came to do away with the law and the prophets. The law and the prophets, Moses was a prophet. So the writings of Moses, the five books that Moses wrote, then all the other prophetic books, the books of Kings, all those books, you can't just discard them. They are the substance on which this whole philosophy is built. So he says, don't think I came to destroy or remove the Jews, or their laws, or their prophets. I didn't come to destroy, but to fulfill. I came to show you what was written, and I came to live it out and to perfect it. I came to show you how it was supposed to be. And then he will go in and explain that later in the speech. And he says, for verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass away from the law. So a tittle is a little mark. Not one single little mark will disappear from the law till all things be accomplished. So all things are not accomplished. Why would we think we can discard our Jewish brother? I want to read something very, very important to you. This is in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 14. Speaking about Christ, for he himself is our peace, who has made us both one, and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility, that's Jew and Gentile, by abolishing the law of commandments expressed in ordinances, that he might create in himself one new man in place of the two, so making peace, and might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby killing the hostility. So we're not supposed to be hostile to each other. There was a hostility between the unsaved world and the Jewish people. But after Christ, there shouldn't be. That's crazy. Now, this idea that the Old Testament is done away with is really pretty crazy. In Ezekiel, I think it's chapter 32, verse 20, it says that the Levitical, and God speaking, it's actually God speaking, he says that unless man can take away night and day, neither Christ nor the Levitical priesthood will disappear. So that, in other words, it can never happen that the Levitical priesthood will disappear. The Levitical priesthood is the Old Testament. Basically, think about it that way. I don't want to get into too much detail now, but the Jews had priests, high priests, and that's the priesthood. Jesus being the new high priest, he's saying, yes, I am the new high priest, but I'm retaining the old. And we don't get to discard that. If Jesus said, I'm not discarding it. And he has very, very good reasons. So then he says, whoever then shall break one of these least commandments and shall teach men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no wise enter into the kingdom of heaven. So the scribes and Pharisees lived very pedantic lives. They would take a tenth of their little, if they grew mint, and Jesus actually says this in the Bible. He says, you grow your mint and your cumin and your aniseed, and you take a tenth of that and you tithe it at the temple. So in other words, you give of that to the temple, but you ignore the weightier matters of the law, which are justice and mercy. So Jesus was saying, if you think you're going to live like that, you're wrong. You can't live out the law, micro-examine yourself all the time that you're living exactly correctly and being precise, but you're not the light shining to the world. You're not out there doing anything for anybody else. Your faith is inside of you, and are you being perfect? Jesus isn't interested in you being perfect. He's interested in you being out there helping others. So if you're not a light, if you're not salt, and you've taken hold of the law and you're trying to live a very ordered life so that you don't make any mistakes, he's saying you're missing the point. I want you to get out there and do justice and do mercy and be good to people. Again, interestingly, this is very interesting. The word justice, our understanding as Gentiles of the word justice is it's the punishment meted out after you do something wrong. That's not what Jesus meant when he said, I want you to do justice. The Jewish understanding of the word justice is completely different to the way we understand the word justice. So we need to understand the way Jesus meant for us to do justice. Now this is very interesting. The Jewish word justice means a vessel that is full of water. So when somebody walks in, they draw water off the top of the vessel and they can drink. What it means is, if you can picture in olden days where there weren't running taps and having water in the home or in any premises was vital, they had big earthen jars so that they could keep water in the house and keep it cool. Now imagine getting home, you've been working in the field, you come walking into your abode, your tent, whatever they lived in, and that vessel's empty. Then that person needed something right then, but it's not there. Justice is to do something. In Jesus' mind, justice was to do something for someone without them having to ask you, to prepare the way, to make it easier for them. Jesus meant justice is to make things easier for people and have it there when they need it. If you think of our conception of justice, we conceive justice to be, let's give someone punishment when they do something wrong. But you see, the courts aren't supposed to be that way. The courts are supposed, and if you're thinking of justice in terms of the courts, the court is where the poor should be able to go to get justice, to get their rights. And their right is to have what they need and not have it taken away by the rich. So the court was actually to defend the weak, to defend the poor. It's not simply to punish all the evildoers. This idea of justice is very Western, and it's not Christ's. Christ intended justice. We must think of justice as Him commanding us to help people. And if you go, just pick a random silly example. If you go and do the dishes so that your wife doesn't have to, that's justice. You took a weight off somebody. Jesus said we must help widows and orphans. We must go take the weight off them. We must, that's justice. To do something for someone that they don't have to do for themselves. To take the weight off. That's justice. Help people. It's not complicated. So, here's Jesus. Preamble. Be salt and light. And don't think that He came to do away with the law or the Jewish people. You know that as I read to you from Ephesians, He presents us as one through the cross. The Jew and the Gentile are brothers. This is actually brilliantly put out in the parable of the wayward son. The one son heads off, the other one remained home. The one who remained home was the Jew, and the one who went out and squandered his inheritance was the Gentile, and the Gentile returns home. Now, you can go and read that parable, and there's a lot in there, but any usage of that parable, other than the way I've just expressed it, is actually incorrect. It is simply a parable saying the one stayed home. The Jew, with his law and his priesthood, remained home with God. He hasn't left God. We did, and we have to be brought back. Now that's roughly what that parable means. If I get a chance, I'll explain it in more detail. But that's what Jesus was speaking about in that parable. He was trying to tell us so that in future times when we read it, we could understand that the Jew and the Gentile are brothers under Christ to God. So that's the preamble. I hope it was interesting, and I'll see you in the next portion.